Good morning, Vietnam, and
I'm
America.
not in Ho
America
Chi Minh
meets
City, that's
Vietnam.
for sure.
Is it still America
I'm
these days?
well, so far, I'm in the lovely city of Boston, which, and actually my university is on a little peninsula, and about every other day I have the fantasy that we're going to have to hold it off with automatic weapons against the Trump brown shirts. But anyway, I think we'll be safe here in Boston for a while.
So it's not quite a fascist state yet, but
Not
moving
a
in that
fascist.
direction. Yes. Well, let's talk
Well,
about
that's
building walls, keeping the original occupants of America out of America. Get all those Mexicans who many of them used to live over like in America. Get them out again. That's what he's calling for, is it?
Well, for those of us who have a trans-evolutionary perspective, the idea of an original occupant of this landmass, which didn't even used to be a united landmass, used to be Pangaea, so
Pangaea,
yeah,
yes,
all
that's right. There is no original. Yes,
reunite Pangaea.
yes,
That's my
that's right.
slogan.
Yeah, one world, one government,
Yeah,
one land. That'd be awesome. So yes,
but yeah,
there's been a
we're
lot of hysteria in the media around the whole politicking. It's been quite a few accusations thrown at both Donald and Hillary. And I recently read in an interview that Bernie Sanders, if he does, get some position of power, will still be a thorn in Hillary's side. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Bernie, we have great hopes for Bernie, and Elizabeth Warren is the other
Okay.
great hope of the progressive left in the United States, who's actually the senator from Massachusetts, from representing Boston and et al.
Mm-hmm.
And she is the one who's been the more loyal insider. Bernie had never joined the Democratic Party until the last year.
Mm-hmm.
But together, the two of them, and the WikiLeaks reveal this as well, that together the two of them put enormous pressure on Hillary and the Democratic leadership to move to the left. And I think, they really wouldn't even have needed Bernie and Elizabeth to put that pressure, because the Trump phenomenon itself is a substantial argument that social democratic politics has moved in too far a middle class direction and really needs to ramp up its economic populist appeal to white working class, as well as working classes of all flavors. So I think that you see this phenomenon throughout European, Australian, all social democratic politics, because of the embrace of the Enlightenment. There's a certain brand of Enlightenment values, the cosmopolitanism of Enlightenment values, that is of a special appeal to highly educated people and affluent people, and those people tend to be benefiting from globalization and technological change right now.
Okay.
And the domestic working class populations that are feeling a lot more economic precarity are turning to nativism and the far right and populist messages. And so it's created this inversion that social democrats are having a harder time connecting with domestic working class populations, and an easier time. This is the first American election in which the Democrats are going to have the majority of college educated voters. So we need to not necessarily flip it around. I'd like everybody to support the left, but we need to figure out what the message is and the policies that would actually appeal to the people who are hardest hit by economic precarity. And I think that you and I know that technological unemployment is coming down the road, and that this is going to affect all workers, and that the universal basic income. I think that one of the things that universal basic income is going to do is going to universalize the appeal of security in a way that undercuts the narrative of austerity and welfare dependence and so forth. That right now you have this idea that has been around since the war on poverty in the United States, that if you are for public assistance of any kind, that somehow you're supporting those people, those welfare queens, those African Americans, those illegal immigrants. They're the ones who are going to benefit from all these social protections, and that you and your loyal tax-paying brood are not benefiting from them. But in fact, half of all the United States is dependent on public assistance of one form or another. I don't know what the percentage is in Australia. And when technological unemployment goes on to wreak what it's going to wreak, it will be a much higher percentage. So I think that all this dynamic is going to change. But the left, because it's become or the progressive social democratic electoral left, because it's become increasingly beholden to affluent middle classes, and in the United States to a corporate elite, a Wall Street elite, a lawyer elite, who are for whom radical redistribution is anathema. It has a heck of a time trying to come up with the kind of redistributive message that it needs to. I'm not entirely happy with the parties that have flipped to a hard left position. Corbyn is not exactly to my taste. But insofar as he represents the appeal that may eventually be necessary in order to win back, British working people, I think it's basically the right approach. Of course, right now, Theresa May has 50% in the polls, and Corbyn has like 25%. So it is the electoral evidence isn't quite there yet, and the fact that Trump is, still within a hair's breadth of becoming the world, finger on the trigger president is crazy. But anyway, I'm sorry to go on a long rant, but we're experiencing election derangement syndrome here in the United States, and all of us, wake up and the first thing we do in the morning is check 10 different poll aggregation sites, and the last thing we do at night is watch all the evening news and make sure that nothing crazy has happened. So.
You mentioned that he's a hair's breadth away, but a lot of the polls don't seem to indicate that. Most people are saying that he's got a very small chance of winning at this stage. At this stage, it looks as though, like, according to the best estimates that I've heard about, look, I'm no expert on this, you are, but I'm definitely not, but it just seems like he is not really going to win. I mean, there's a chance, and that chance is bad enough as it is, but it looks as though on balance is losing.
No, you're absolutely right. It's right now it looks like a 15% chance according to Nate Silver, who's our current grand poobah prognostication. However, if I told you that you had a 1 in 6 chance of being electrocuted to death every morning that you went in your kitchen, you'd probably be pretty frightened.
I wouldn't go to my kitchen. Yeah.
You wouldn't go in your kitchen, right?
I'd climb out the bedroom window and find another house, or maybe even another country. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, there are some unknowns right now about the election. How many people are afraid to tell pollsters that they're fascists? And so the polling may be a little skewed by that. Mm-hmm. There are a couple polls that have consistently had Trump 1 or 2 points ahead that use unusual methodologies. And so, there's some cause for anxiety, but not much. Yeah, no, I've shifted most of my attention to, our ability to regain the Senate, the U.S. Senate, and then, the House, because we've been so gerrymandered by the Republicans, even though the majority of congressional votes go towards the Democrats in every election, because of the political gerrymandering that's been done, the Republicans have a lock on the House for the time being. Anyway, this is all inside the Beltway. In terms of what it plays out for futurism, let me say this.
Well, futurism is a fascist art movement, so let's call it futurology, shall we?
Futurology, the connection between emerging technologies and politics, which is my obsession, my idea fix. That when I wrote Citizen Cyborg back 12 years ago, I thought that we were beginning to enter into an era where the traditional political framework was going to be complexified by biopolitics and technopolitics. And I thought that people on the libertarian end were going to split around these questions. I thought the people on the progressive end were going to split around these questions, and that everything was going to get really interesting, and that people like me, left, technophiles and transhumanists, would have some things in common with the libertarians and some things not in common with libertarians. All of that got turned on its ear in 2008 with the global economic crisis, and the economic insecurity that it generated is now we're reaping the political whirlwind of that with the growth of the far right and terrorism, and there a lot of other things that are happening in the world. The anxieties that people feel about radical Islam, and so this moment looks a heck of a lot less that like the 2030 conflict between radical cyborgs on one hand and pitchfork-wielding bio-Luddites of left and right on the other, and that we were going to establish the new socialist road to Mars, blah, blah, blah. This looks a lot more like 1932, 1932 with cell phones. If it's 1932, then we have a really different set of agenda items to address: how to stop fascism, how to protect liberal democracy, and so forth. Now, in terms of what the technological agenda is, one interesting tidbit: Newt Gingrich has tried to position himself as one of the futurists on the right. And he's, for instance, he proposed famously building a colony on the moon. And he was an early proponent of nanotechnology. He was the leader of the anti-Clinton congressional revolution of 1994, the contract with America. And he's a staunch Trump supporter. And he's currently positioning himself to take over the Trump alt-right movement when this election's done and Trump goes down in flames, which I expect he will. And so Newt's a lot smarter than Trump, a lot more disciplined than Trump. And you add to that the fact that the most wealthy and influential transhumanist philanthropist in the world, Peter Thiel, who has previously been also not only the principal financier of a number of transhumanist organizations and futurist operations, but also the principal financier of Republican candidacies of Rand and Ron Paul. He's the backer of some of the dirty tricks operations that have brought down progressive organizations, community organizations in the United States like Acorn. And now he's the only major. There are other major billionaires who are supporting Trump, a couple, but he's the only person from Silicon Valley who has openly embraced Trump. The rest are running as far away from Trump as they possibly can. And he just doubled down this last week, in the wake of everything, in the wake of the sexual violence, in the wake of the fact that Thiel himself is under indictment for racially discriminating against his own employees. All of these things are nothing, apparently, to the need to double down in support of this proto-fascist leader. And so I think, this is a time where we can't say anymore that transhumanism has to be one big broad tent, and that we have to embrace one another in a spirit of tolerance and move forward together around the things that we agree on. That's not the moment that we're in. The moment that we're in is one where, if you are supporting Trump, I don't care if you want life extension. I don't care if you want to decriminalize cognitive enhancement drugs, whatever we consider to be our common transhumanist agenda. You are, fascism is fascism. I'm sorry, we have to part ways. So this is a moment where I really think the argument for a clear techno-progressive separation and organization in the global sphere, what we used to call in the traditional left, which, as I said, it's 1932 again, we used to call an ideological tendency. We need to organize the ideological tendency of techno-progressivism. And it has an agenda, which we outlined in Paris 2 years ago. The agenda is one that addresses both the technological blindness on the part of many progressive movements and the political blindness on the part of many futurists and transhumanists and people interested in emerging technologies. Sorry, another word.
Well, there are a few people, a few transhumanists who are supporting Trump. If it seems like you have something to say, if you were to try and convince these people, I'm sure you know who they are. If you were to try and convince these people, what would you say to them if you had the chance to sit them down in a room directly and point a few things out?
Well, it's interesting. I'm 55 years old, and I and my family, my wife, we've been through a lot on the progressive side of politics. And you can't be a progressive for any period of time, especially a white progressive in the United States, before someone's going to call you a racist, say you're not sufficiently sensitive to transgender pronouns, that you're just a poser, middle class bourgeois poser, something. They're going to say something to you. And if your amygdala is so finely tuned and your sense of self is so delicate, that's immediately going to set you off and say, oh, well, screw the left. I'm not a progressive anymore. The neocons were right. Political correctness is a new form of fascism. I see a little bit of that on the part of some of my transhumanists of a certain age, old white guys, who are really pissed off about political correctness. And they're constantly posting crap on social media about political correctness. And it's like, look, black men have a 30 times higher chance in the United States of getting arrested and shot to death for no reason, for the same crimes. When we start addressing the real issues, I'll take your political correctness seriously, your concerns about political correctness. I'm perfectly willing to acknowledge that there are assholes on the left, but for anybody to pretend that the concerns about racial justice or sexism or whatever that sometimes go over the line into speech codes and political correctness is at all comparable to the threat to public speech and civil liberties that a Donald Trump and his ultra-right fascist stormtroopers in waiting are, who would clearly like to take away. I mean, Donald Trump has announced that he wants to change the American First Amendment so that he can put in prison reporters that say things about him that he doesn't like. He's said this openly, So I just don't understand where that kind of a political. I do. I mean, it comes from their amygdala. It comes from the ossification of the brain and a lack of self-awareness. Anyway, that's part of it, I think. I think that for some people, I think that there's a deep antipathy about Hillary Clinton. Now, when Hillary first ran, I and the political folks that I hung out with did not like the Clintons. They were part of a conservative faction within the Democratic Party called the DLC. And there were other candidates who were more progressive than she was. That Bill and Hillary never embraced universal single-payer health care, for instance. I actually liked the health care reform proposal that she put forward in 1994. And she was always considered to the left of Bill. Who knew, really? And she wasn't a bad senator, and I blame her for absolutely nothing that happened while she was Secretary of State. I mean, the idea that Benghazi was her fault or any of the other things that happened, she's more hawkish than Obama. Now, Obama's lack of hawkishness means that he has used drones to a greater extent. Now, is a drone the emerging technology that we progressives want to embrace? I mean, I know a lot of progressives who think they're anathema. If we had tried to accomplish American foreign policy goals or international security goals, or however you want to frame it, using boots on the ground, I don't think we would have gotten any farther and had any fewer tragedies on both sides. So I'm not convinced that Hillary's approach to foreign policy is necessarily going to be worse for the world than Obama's. I know there are progressives who hate both of them for one reason or another. I'm not one of them. I'm more interested in, having a U.S. projection of force in the world that actually addresses the tangible threats that the world face. ISIS, Russia, China expansion, et cetera. We've got a leader of the Philippines who's, if it's at all possible, worse than Trump. So, we've got some serious problems in the world. So I think having a robust female executive is not necessarily a problem. Anyway, I think, but a lot of people in the United States, on the left as well as the right, have bought 30 years of constant hostility and conspiracy theories about Hillary, saying that she's, this and that. And I think that the objective record is that she actually has been a solid left of center politician. Yes, she's changed her mind. Obama wasn't for gay marriage until it was politically acceptable to be for gay marriage. I mean, we can valorize Obama all we want. He wasn't for single payer. She was to the left of him on healthcare reform until he had to move a little bit to the left. So, I think we can valorize anybody we want in politics. But, you look at Francois Hollande or any left leader that's ever gotten elected, they immediately have to create compromises. So the only people who are pure in politics are people who never get elected. So, that's why Trotskyists are always so happy in their tiny little isolation, because they never get elected, and so they can always remain pure. Anyway, I think, I don't understand why people support Trump. It's crazy to me. I mean, we would be the first people up against the wall once he's, fully in power.
Oh, God. That one looks like a lefty. You get him up against the wall. You can imagine that, those Pink Floyd tunes coming at this stage, yeah. So it looks like Obama's said in an interview that he's going to take political platforms or activist platforms that his current position as the President of the United States won't allow him to do. I don't know. What do you think he's going to do after he's finished?
Well, there are two very interesting recent streams of speculation about this. One is that he's obviously very concerned about helping the Democrats position themselves to take over redistricting, which occurs every 10 years in the United States around the census. And he recognizes that he and the Democrats dropped the ball in the last redistricting, dropped the ball politically in the sense that we didn't see how vital it was for Democrats to control state legislatures and governorships in the run-up to the 2010 redistricting, and that it's absolutely vital that we do it this time. As I said, for the last four elections, some people who voted for Democrats were in the majority at the legislative level, and yet we continue to be in the minority legislatively, and that's because of this redistricting issue. Of course, I'd like to turn. This is one issue where I think we could easily turn this over to a computer. You talk about algorithmic democracy or algocracy.
Algocracy, yeah. But it's usually brought up in a negative sense, right? After interviewing John Danaher. I mean, he was pretty objective, but I mean, he does position his essays in a sort of a negative, a portrayal of algocracy for sure. But yeah, go ahead.
I disagree with John about this. I think algocracy is neutral, but can be a great boon to democracy, and it's relatively inevitable. And so the question is how we democratize algocracy, not whether we have algocracy.
So you might be putting the square quotes around all these sorts of things, so as to, I guess, motivate or mobilize people to bias the outcome of the way these algorithms are used for the better of the majority, or the good of everybody, hopefully.
Right. I mean, it's the same about globalization. I mean, globalization has a negative valence for people, but, like Hillary in the WikiLeaks, where Hilary Clinton was giving speeches to bankers, and she said her dream was a world with open borders, and yeah, mine too. Free trade and open borders. The question is, have it be fair, have it be accountable, have, et cetera, et cetera. But okay.
It would certainly raise chaos. But yeah, I'm talking about using getting a computer to do all this stuff. Just picking up from a computer
to do redistricting is one where we already have the algorithms that could do. Could take population centers and make logical boundaries around them for redistricting. unfortunately, neither Democrats nor Republicans in the United States have ever embraced the idea that of turning it over to a computer because they both want to use it to game the system. So the question is, who gets to game it? Anyway, the other thing that Obama appears to be tilting towards is taking some kind of role in Silicon Valley, which would be really fascinating if a former president began to get directly involved in technology governance issues. I hope it's not just as a lobbyist, but apparently, some kind of like Gates Foundation role or
Mm,
something like, something like that would be fascinating.
mm,
So, yeah, I'm enthusiastic because Obama's still a relatively young man and he's got a lot of interventions to do. And you see with Clinton, what he did with the political capital he had from the Clinton Foundation, and with Carter and the Habitat for Humanity. So, I think a lot of good can still be done by the guy.
okay, yeah, he seems like he's got his head screwed on relatively well compared to some of the previous presidents. But yeah, I hope he does stay active. Yeah. So, is there anything more you want to say about the current political climate before we move on to the actual White House paper that came out about AI, which we'll put in a separate video for everybody watching?
Well, I could go on and on about the current political climate. Let me just say something about third parties. You know, um, I have a lot of sympathy for third parties, but they've really, in the United States, in this particular election, revealed their vacuity. Um, and it just reinforced my long held belief that third party building is not a way for we futurists to build our political intervention, at least in a place like the United States.
Hmm.
Um, if the result of the Greens, which have been around for 20 years, and hold a number of elected offices in the country, and the Libertarians who've been around for 35 years and hold a number of elected offices in this country, if the result of the best that they can do is to put up two candidates who shrivel to nothing under public scrutiny, imagine what if the media, real media, had taken Zoltan Istvan seriously. How much ridicule it would have brought upon the ideas that he supposedly represents. And so I think we really have to, in the next iteration, and as we move forward, we who are interested in having a political and public policy impact for ideas that are informed by the understanding that emerging technologies are imminent, we really need to take seriously how to do it in ways other than these marginal subcultural, our performance art pieces. That is what we've seen so far of third-party building, transhumanist party building.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
my last thought. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right, so for everybody interested, we're going to now move on to a new video discussing some of an interview Obama had with Wired about the future of artificial intelligence and the future of work, automation, all those sorts of things, as well as the White House paper that had been brought out. So stay tuned.